We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's February 21st here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning, Ann.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, every day we do make a news feed for the new generation, and we're looking at the top trending hashtags on social media over the past 24 hours. Here they are. The first hashtag is Meta Verified. Meta, the company that owns popular social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram, said it will launch a paid verification service that will give their users a blue checkmark. This paid subscription service lets users verify their account with a government ID. This will prevent other users from impersonating them and will provide direct access to customer support. This service starts at $11.99 a month, and it will first roll out in Australia and New Zealand this week. Then it will be available in more countries soon. The second hashtag is Real Meter. This pollster conducted a survey on roughly 2,500 adults last week, and it found out President Yoon Suk-yeol's approval rating has risen to over 40% for the first time in 6 weeks. The poll analyzed this to be from the administration, focusing more on economic and livelihood matters. The last hashtag is Soju. Soju, one of the most popular alcoholic drinks in Korea, is expected to have another price hike of around 20%. Last year, soju factories received 85 won, or around 6 cents more for each bottle. This then raised consumer prices by around up to 77 cents, and the reason behind this is a higher liquor tax and an increase in raw materials and logistics causes. Now let's delve a bit deeper into the first hashtag, Meta Verified. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced through an Instagram post on Sunday that this new feature is aimed at boosting authenticity and security across its services. Users have to be at least 18 years old, meet a minimum account activity, and submit a government ID that matches their profile name and photo. Businesses, though, aren't currently eligible to apply, and Meta also said it won't make changes to accounts that already have been verified. It's not the only social media firm to start offering a paid premium service, though. Last December, Twitter launched Twitter Blue subscription services, which grants users a verification badge as long as they pay a monthly fee. Now, why don't we expand our news feed here to the studio? Walter, how common is this so-called account impersonation or on fake accounts on social media? And have you ever experienced it yourself or witnessed it?
Well, I see it all the time on Instagram. You see it on people's stories where they're like, please don't follow this account, this is a fake account. I mainly only see it on female accounts, I've noticed. However, I don't think I'm that interesting to pretend to follow, so I don't think anyone cares about what I do, which is good. Keep it that way.
We'll see. And Ji-hee, are you on board with this concept of social media platforms rolling out a monthly subscription service to guarantee extra authentication and privacy?
Well, I do think this new service will filter out fake accounts, which usually cause all these issues on social media platforms. But I also think at the same time, people will hesitate to sign up for this paid service because we've been using social media platforms really for free until now. So it just makes me wonder if there could be any other way of ensuring stronger protection for privacy. And because from a critical and even cynical perspective, I think companies are just using a good reason or cause to really make more money. I mean, why can't they make stricter terms and conditions really for free?
Right, exactly. And I think that's what social media users are expecting, that our privacy and authentication be guaranteed without having to pay a price. All right, and that was our news feed for this Tuesday. Moving on, every day we discuss different topics that interest or are directly related to the younger generation. And here's what we have for you today. If you're 65 and older in Korea, you can take the subway for free. That's how it's been for around 40 years. It was one of the many ways the government aimed to keep the senior population active and involved in society. But as people are living for longer and South Korea's population ages, there's a growing number of critics saying that this policy is no longer affordable. Back in 1984, when the policy was first introduced, only 4% of the country's population were aged 65 and above. Now, this proportion is around 18%. And Statistics Korea forecasts that by 2035, this proportion will reach 30%. As South Korea quickly heads into a super-aged society, metro companies have decided to compensate for the losses that come from more people riding for free by hiking subway fares for everybody else. This is stirring conflict between the generations. Many young subway riders said it's unfair, prompting some cities to consider increasing the minimum age of free riding instead to 70. Some senior riders say they aren't the sole reason for metro companies' deficit. Instead, they cited the increase in operating costs, including repairs and maintenance of aging trains and systems. Today, NewsGen looks at 3 questions. 1. How does the younger generation perceive this thorny issue? From what age should one be considered a senior citizen? 2. What are some pros and cons behind this welfare policy? 3. How are other countries shaping their senior welfare policy amid longer life expectancy? Are there any other countries that allow seniors to ride public transport for free? As we just saw, today we're going to be talking about this controversial issue, whether we should keep allowing seniors age 65 and up to ride the subway for free. Chi-hee, as you just saw in the video, some cities in Korea are thinking of increasing the minimum age to ride the subway for free from 65 to 70. But why 70?
Right. Well, this whole idea was brought up in the first place and became an issue mainly for 2 reasons. And first is that subway corporations, like mentioned earlier, have been facing deficit for years now. I will talk about that in more detail later. And the second reason is that South Korea is rapidly aging. Now, in the past, those 65 and older didn't take up such a large portion of the country's total population, but now they account for over 17%. Which is a lot, and this will reach 20% within 3 years even. Now, if we take a look at the screen for a minute, we can see that the Millennials' opinion on the idea of raising the minimum age to ride the subway for free to 70 is quite high. So if we take a look at the screen, the survey was conducted very recently on some 580 young people, and it shows that more than 75% are for the idea, and only about 14 are against. And the main argument of those who welcome this idea is that we can no longer sit back and watch the subway deficits continue to grow every year and leave the younger generation to deal with this issue alone.
Right, so a growing number of the younger generation are against this free riding concept, but I think another issue that is involved with this controversial free riding topic is the appropriate age we consider one to be a senior citizen. With longer life expectancy, Walter, do you think 65 is too young for us to consider one to be a senior citizen?
Well, this is actually a really difficult question because I do sympathize with the 65-year-olds or the 65 around, but I really do understand the reasoning behind it and talking about what Chi-hee just mentioned as well. The deficit is important to fix. However, I don't think it's something that needs that we can do at this moment.
Right.
You know, raising the age won't solve the deficit immediately, and in fact will put more of a financial pressure on the elderly. Then one might ask, why don't they get a job? I mean, or they should get a job. The retirement age in Korea is around 60, which is still quite young.
It is.
It is extremely hard for senior citizens Korean senior citizens to get a job or even stay in jobs. And even the jobs that they're in don't pay a lot of money.
Right.
And the poverty rate for Korean citizens over the age of 65 is over 38%. And as we said, we're becoming an aging society, and so therefore it's going to get bigger.
Exactly. And as of 2021, only 3 out of 10 seniors aged 60 and up had a job. So it's worth noting that a lot of the senior population, even though they want to work, society is making that a bit difficult, right? And Chi-hee, what are your thoughts on this? Is 65 too young to be considered a senior citizen that can contribute to the economy?
Well, as we know, longevity has been growing, and experts say the number of centenarians citizens, people who live up to at least 100 years old, are growing. And even the number of people who can reach 110 is also expected to grow according to studies. So I think 60, which is just a little over half of that age, is still very young, and you can be still very active and motivated to work. And like Walter said, in my perception, old people, the senior citizens, are really people who seem feeble and need care, even with going outside or doing any other outdoor activity. And I asked my parents as well, who just turned 60 this year, what they think about this age, and they said the same thing. They're completely capable of working. They're very motivated to do and try new things. And if my dad is even still working, so I think it really is a young age to be called a senior citizen or old people.
Exactly, and the government does acknowledge that. That's why last year alone they created 845,000 jobs for seniors. But as you mentioned, Walter, these jobs are mostly concentrated in the public and social sector, meaning it's not too high of a pay. And extending talks on our discussion topic today, what do you think are the pros and cons of this senior free riding policy in the subway then?
Well, like I said earlier, those 65 and up are still very capable of working. They can contribute to the economy. They can make money, you know. So and also subway corporations, like I said, in 6 cities really nationwide, including Seoul, and they also include Busan, Incheon, Daegu, Daejeon, and Gwangju. They've faced financial deficits for years. So on average, annual deficit that they faced is some 460 million US dollars. That's between 2017 and 2021. And also, secondly, there's a problem of equity because some elderly citizens or residents living in underdeveloped rural areas, they don't get to enjoy this convenient public transportation because they don't have enough infrastructure supporting that.
I see. And what do you think are the pros and cons behind this welfare policy, Walter?
Well, it actually reminds me, like I was watching this show with you and G here, and you briefly talked about South Korea having the highest rate of suicide in the OECD countries.
Right.
Well, part of that statistic is the elderly. Now, the ability to have this free access to transportation encourages the elderly to go out, meet their friends, and improve their health and well-being, and hopefully reduce the risk of this alarming suicide rate that we have in South Korea.
Right, and so if I sum up, Chihi, I think you're more on the side of we should be against this free ride senior policy only because, you know, there's still a lot of deficit matters, economic matters. Whereas Walter, you think this could be a really good welfare policy to bring more seniors out into society and raise their happiness rates. Now, Walter, then how is it like abroad? Do other countries have a similar policy like Korea?
Okay, so I'll take my, I grew up in Brisbane, Australia, and they have a very good system there for the senior citizens that I think maybe even South Korea could maybe adopt. So they have what's called an off-peak free service public transportation for senior citizens. Now, that means free public transport between the peak hours, not during the peak hours. So this could benefit also the rest of the public. As we know in Seoul, if you ride the subway at peak hours, it's ridiculous.
It's crazy here.
It's crowded. So if the elderly were only given times of, you know, between those peak hours for free transportation, that would mean less people on the subway during those peak times and therefore more comfortable for the rest of us.
I think that's a very good example of what we can refer to in the future. But why don't we expand talks to include another global millennial and hear how their country does it and if we can, you know, follow suit in any other way? We're now going to be speaking with a millennial from Japan. It's Naoaki Shinjo, the Sustainability Coordinator of Obuse Town in Nagano, Japan. Great to have you here, Naoaki.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Naoaki Shinjo. I'm working for local government as a sustainability coordinator.
All right,
to
great to have you here, Naoaki. And as you said, you're from Japan, and it's one of the fastest aging countries in the world, but South Korea has been catching up. In 2 years' time, we'll become a super aged society, and officials here have been looking into Japan's senior population policies to craft their own. So could you explain if Japan has a similar policy to Korea, which allows certain seniors to ride public transport for free? And from what age does Japan consider someone to be a senior citizen?
Okay. We have similar policies, but we don't in the national level, but it depends on local governments. Well, many local governments provide senior citizens with subsidies to ride public transport for free or with less expenses. Well, in the areas where public transportation is not convenient, they give subsidies to provide companies or non-profit organizations which operate shared taxis. Well, in Japan, similarly to South Korea, we are considered as the elderly when we become 65.
I see.
This is probably similar to the other developed countries too. But actually, we have a healthcare system for people who are 75 and older called Advanced Elderly Medical Service System. Well, therefore, we tend to distinguish between people from 65 to 74 and 75 and or older.
All right, that's definitely different from how it is here in Korea. Jihi, do you have a question for Naoaki?
Right, so as you've heard from our discussion, a lot of youngsters in Korea don't think it's fair that some seniors are riding the subway for free. So how's it like in Japan? Are there any senior policies specifically related to using public transport or receiving a service free of charge that have ruffled some feathers or caused controversy?
Well, actually, I don't think many young people in Japan think it is unfair or strongly against that. I think it is because elderly people, well, I think we rather take it for granted because it was already so since we were small children. Well, but the topic is different. Well, we think it's unfair for our old age pension system. Because we have to pay for the system after we become 20 years old. But it is predicted we will not be able to benefit from the system when we become old in the future.
Right, I think that's the same case here in Korea. And Walter, do you have a brief question you'd like to ask?
Yeah, so I hear that you try to narrow the generational gaps, specifically those found in the countryside of Japan. Now, how do you approach this issue, and could you give us any suggestions?
Well, in the local area, I think, well, it is very difficult because we already become minority in the countryside. So it is becoming, so I think it is important to increase the number of young people who are interested in political issues. Well, especially in regional councils where we have very small number of councillors in local areas. So, well, I belong to the organization Instagram medium called No Use No Japan, and we are trying to encourage Japanese young people to engage in policy making by spreading information about various social issues.
All right, thank you so much, Naoaki. It was a pleasure to have you here and hear your insight.
Thank you very much.
Now, if I bring the discussion back to the studio, any points that Naoaki made that fascinated you, Jihi?
I think it was interesting how they had a different public sentiment. So the younger generation there don't think it's unfair, while in Korea, it's really the main argument why they oppose free rides for the elderly citizens. But they think it's not unfair because they've been used to it since they were little children, right?
Right. I think that was really fascinating. Was there any other point that fascinated you, Walter?
No, I definitely agree with Chi, and I think maybe it's also a cultural thing as well, where they also feel pressured from the elderly not to be, against what they're saying, which is sometimes what we have in here as well. However, I think maybe South Korea is a bit more outspoken than Japan, so it's quite interesting.
I think narrowing this generational gap anywhere is very important, like globally. Now, given that we are a live morning program, we always ask our viewers questions related to our discussion topic in advance, and we use this time to share with you what they had to say. So we asked our viewers what is the age of senior citizens in your country, and in your opinion, at what age should people become senior citizens to receive benefits? MS said in the US, 65 is the typical senior citizen age because it's a common age to retire at, but my mom started getting senior citizen discounts at the grocery store when she was only 55. Siska Andriani said Indonesia has a senior citizen policy which starts from 60 years old, and she thinks it's a good age to be considered a senior and get benefits from the government. And Raul said in Argentina, senior citizens are from 60 for ladies and 65 for men because that's the age those people can retire, and in his opinion, they should start to receive benefits from 70. Wow, so we've received a lot of comments from different parts of the world.
We did.
What do you guys think about these comments?
Well, I find it quite interesting that MS's mother gets
Discounts at
discounts
the
at grocery store for 55.
Yeah.
Well, I would be a little bit insulted.
It's such a young age.
It's such a young age. Do I want to be considered an older person at 55 just for a discount at the supermarket?
Exactly, not me. It's not for me either. But what about you, Ji?
Well, as Raul mentioned, it's interesting how Argentina has a different age category for the female and male senior
Right.
citizens. I wonder what the government's rationale behind having this different category is, especially for the retirement age for the
Exactly.
different genders is.
And Raul, please leave a comment for us below and answer what we just asked you. And every day we do upload questions related for our discussion topic for our viewers to answer. And if you want to participate, please search Arirang News on YouTube and look into our community tab. The link is right below. Now, we've already come to the final part of our discussion for today, and I think the issue that we talked about today comes down to intergenerational conflicts. How has this thorny issue widened generation gaps in Korea?
I mean, we've seen through this controversy that we have very divided opinions among the different generations. Like we said earlier, the younger generation think it's really unfair for the elderly generation to have this benefit of riding subways for free. But I mean, in 3 years' time, South Korea will be entering
Super age
super age
society.
society where 20% of the population will be senior citizens, right? So apart from thinking it as an unfair issue, we should really think about it from the social structure and economic perspective. And I mean, Reuters has even called this a political headache for the country, which means it's a really complicated issue. So really, policy efforts must be made in consideration by balancing out the social and economic aspects of the matter.
Right. What are your thoughts on this, Walter?
I'm a bit more brief, but like I understand that the younger generation, my generation, is upset about the senior citizens getting free transportation fees, so therefore wanting to extend it because it does affect us in the end. Our fees get raised and not theirs because they are free, of course. But like we go back to the job situation, they don't earn as much as we do. We don't earn a massive amount of money. However, we definitely earn more than a lot of the other senior citizens. And so therefore we need to take that into account as well. Are they going to be able to afford, let's say, 100,000 Korean won a month for public transportation?
Right, and I think the biggest central issue regarding this matter is who and how we value and view senior citizens. Are we going to be taking care of them? How are we going to be taking care of them? And these are definitely issues that we need to be covering in the near future. And today we talked about the controversial senior free ride policy that has been widening the gap between generations in Korea. We'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Chit Ji-hee
Always a pleasure.
and Walter Lee.
Always lovely to be here.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.
Generation.